Through, yeah.
So happy. Do you remember it?
I remember.
All right, so where we starting? Where we starting? I think we've got, are we ready to go? Yeah, it's good. Got a couple more connections to figure out that Alice has got it.
Okey doke.
So, oh, thank you. I'm
Very
very
excited.
excited
The Christmas
today
cafe.
with all of the Christmas decorations out. So, before we get going, and we know it'll probably go very quickly, but I really do wish everyone a really happy holiday, and I know we all are looking forward to some time off in the next after the next week and a half. But I know lots of exciting things are going on back to school levels, and just hope that you have the ability to enjoy those and celebrate however you do celebrate with your family and with your students back at school too. So this is one part of the year that I do, my heart aches a little bit because I do miss this time of year with all the staff and the families and the students there. So just wanted to send our best wishes to you as well. So and I hope you enjoy your 2 weeks off. Like you can rest and relax and do whatever it is that you would like to do. So I just wish you guys all the best. So,
Yeah, y'all too. Happy holidays.
well,
And it really is such a heck, it's a wonderful time of year, but I think especially in schools, it's a very hectic, wrapping up a semester, so everybody's taking the time to be here is so important. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
absolutely, definitely. So I think before I do know that we had left off with some contract language, but I do think that we just wanted to revisit the salary discussions one more time. And I think it's important to have this discussion each time that we meet. I think you all have agreed just with us that, salaries are very important to all of us, to our employees and so forth. But just to give, bring everybody, I know we've had some proposals being, back and forth and for salary, both, yours, again, with the recurring longevity supplement, anywhere between 250 and 1250. I know the last proposal that we had received from you, had an update that would be in place for the next 3 years, and then sunset. So, we did receive that. I just know that we haven't had a chance to meet as a large group since then. A couple still issues that we have with that, and I know we've voiced those concerns already, being reps eligible and also being recurring even for those 3 years. Then what happens after those 3 years is just kind of our angst a little bit and just some concerns. But so I thought it might be prudent just very briefly, or did you hear me say that? Very briefly, that Mr. Smith could, because he also has had some continuing discussions with various of his financial organizations and so forth, that just has some, just again, I wanted him just to recap, really why some of those concerns might be, for that proposal. So again, Kevin, I'm just going to ask you to just
Sure. So thanks for coming. To Paula's point, I did have conversations with a couple of different rate agencies. Fitch specific. Fitch is a rate agency that rates our bonds. And they make the financial wherewithal of the district. And I'm saying this not because they're about fishery, but I'm saying it because of what they look at, the things they look at. One of the many questions they asked me was about the American Rescue Fund and the ESSA fund, what our intent to do with, what we would do with that fund. And one of the things that they focus on quite heavily is the nature of recurring expenses. So we're using that money to pay recurring expenses. So that is our reluctance for any kind of a recurring expense. Obviously, paying for recurring expense from non-recurring revenue sources is a interesting thing to do. So I can't emphasize enough how much we need to avoid that. Okay? The other thing, since I don't know this whole group, since we do in small group, I'm not sure if you heard this part of it or not. But, we did it as a district this year, experience a reduction of about $18 million. So our funding is down by about $18 million this year. As a result of a reduction at the state level, mainly as a result of declining home. The other thing that's happening is our scholarships are going up pretty significantly. I mean, family empowerment scholarships, our partner scholarships. So, and I know you've heard this in the have said it entirely. So that's another financial strain, financial pressure on the district. FRS rates going up. That's $4 million to us this year. So, and the other thing I want to reiterate is, I was just looking at projections a little while ago where we are financially. This year, reminded when I was going to financial information. Yes,
Speak
ma'am.
up just a little louder.
Sure thing. I was
Thank you.
reminded going through my financial information that we did give a $7 million bonus, for non-recurring bonus to our employees that did not receive a bonus as a result of the governor's proposal. And our offer of 3.25%, and that's a pretty significant amount of money, not to mention the $9 million that they put into health insurance. I know you guys heard of what I felt was important to reiterate that. So, we really have to look at this American Rescue Fund, and I know it's enticing. It's enticing to look at the funding and say it's $300 million worth of funding. Let's use that funding for salaries. If I was on your side of the table, the same exact thing. But the thing we have to avoid is what we're going to do. What are we going to do at the end of those 3 years? Even though we say it's a non-recurring bonus, once it's in the salary schedule, once it's in the model, it's hard to back away from that. So that is my reluctance. My reluctance is that if we agree to something like that, come 3 years from now, how willing would we be to make that go away? And if we didn't make that go away, what kind of adjustments we might make to our expenditures in order to offset the loss of that revenue? $300 million is not an insignificant amount of money. It amounts to roughly a third of our operating fund budget. And that's a huge amount of money. Create a huge clip. We need to definitely avoid. So while we want to continue discussions about salary and discussion, quite frankly, about the use of that money in some ways, that it just I am. And we are as a group unable to agree to reading salary.
And so kind of what we'd like to do tonight is get some ideas of ways to use that money for compensation that's non-recurring salaries. And we met as a small group with Janet, you were there, and the issue there was time. Okay, time is money. So is there a way we incorporate, and again, we have to think about it in this 3-year stretch, more planning, more payment for those sorts of things, which will compensate teachers, but isn't built into a salary schedule wherever. We're concerned about the cliff here when that occurs. So that's something we're considering. We haven't quantified. We'd like to put something together and back with that. Paying staff for training, time, that sort of thing. That's what we're looking for, some ideas from the group. And again, we came up with the one idea, and that's something we're trying to figure out how to do that. So there is money. Kevin said it's enticing to say, well, there's this money, everybody should get a raise. That's something we're not looking to do, other than 3.25, but things like a non-recurring bonus. And when I say bonus, a bonus is something that is defined out of an adjustment in the statute. So that's something that we think would pass the muster, a bonus, time, other ideas, training. Proposals that we're also considering that concern financial impact, and that's covering classes, raising that amount. So there are aspects, financial aspects that we're trying to consider, and we invite you to throw out your suggestions that we could think about trying to put into a proposal.
And I do appreciate that. I appreciate that you're willing to look at some creative ideas, because that is what I did ask when this law, as soon as the law passed, I reached out and said, we need to think creatively about how to work it this year. This isn't going to be a normal salary year. And we need to be creative in coming up with things. So I'm glad to hear that. It's just, my concern is that the veteran teachers are still getting hurt. The intent of this law was to hurt the veteran teachers and to encourage them to move to the annual contract salary, making themselves more vulnerable and unwilling to speak up against things that they might not think are, advocating for their kids, advocating for programs, advocating for autonomy. The annual contract has limited teachers' ability to do that. And we do know that this is not only to encourage people to join the system by raising up the salaries in the beginning, in the early part of the schedule, it's to attract people in, but it's also to entice those who are not on the annual contract to move to it, adding to their vulnerability. And lack of security, which the annual contract teachers are not happy, they're not comfortable with. But because if it was really about merit pay, which is what they say the intent is about merit pay, it would be across the board. Everyone who was highly effective would be getting the higher raise, not just those on the annual contract. So this is a law that's deliberately created to hurt the veteran teachers who are on continuing contracts, and to entice them either to leave the profession or to change contract, both of which would be devastating for public education, because if they leave, that's obvious, that's a devastating hit, because they take their experience with them. But also, if they go on to annual contract teacher contract, they're not as willing to advocate for what they believe is right. So we lose their freedom to try to push forth things that are working in the classroom, or that they have experienced working in the classroom. Either way, it's a loss. So as much as coming up with bonuses, which is, I guess fine on some levels, or well, paying for training, everyone gets paid for training, so that wouldn't be new. And we've already discussed upping the the amount that they get paid for subbing or covering classes. That's all, that we are talking about raising that up a bit. The longevity supplement's the only way toward equity. And we really thought in the discussion that we had about, and we understood about the recurring, non-recurring funds, we get it. And that's why we thought, then let's just make the agreement for as long as the funds will be there, let's just make, and then that can be renegotiated. Who knows what the laws will be in 3 years?
Right. And
We have no idea. That's why it's a whole new ballgame. In 3 years, the law may have changed because they may have gotten everybody up to the level where they kind of want them, and they may not see the need for this kind of stringent rule filled legislation. And we would be more, then we can say, well, then now there really is no need for the longevity supplement anymore. I mean, there are all kinds of things. We can't predict what's going to happen in 3 years. And that's why we thought we were solving the problem of the non-recurring, the recurring problem by saying we're willing to just set it in place for a limited amount of time and not say that it's forever, and make it clear that it must be renegotiated because the circumstances could be completely different.
How do you envision that? Let's just say everything, because we have to look at all, you're right, you're exactly right. Things may be totally different in 3 years. Things could also be very much the same without the additional or worse. And we are declining enrollment, so we need to kind of remember, kind of keep that in mind as well. But how do you envision someone here who has received the longevity supplement that comes to an end in 3 years? How do you envision that happening? What do you envision that looking like after the 3rd year if things have not changed and we do not have the funding source to provide that? Can you share with me how you envision that? And I understand what you said, that it would be renegotiated. That's easy to say a statement, but share with me what you see that, envision that.
I think that we look at it as, we've said it before at the table, that the budget really is just your priorities in dollars.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so setting up, knowing that we have this infusion of over 200 million, if you look at the total, we're looking at closer, over 300 million, if you look at the total under the ESSER of the American Rescue Plan, over the next 3 years, it gives you the opportunity to plan. This is not, we try to focus on one thing.
I'm so sorry, yes, I've heard that planning, but how do you envision it? We are sitting here in 3 years. How do you see?
I can see there being difficulties with people who are not paying attention. Because if they ratify the contract, they would have to understand that that is the agreement, that this is for 3 years. So they would have to be in on the agreement, which they are when that is the whole point of ratification, that we can't make agreements that they don't get to approve.
I also don't think that we are necessarily operating on these because it's really not our place to assume that I'm glad this discussion is happening. I think one of the challenges with it is that we have continually come up with plans, suggestions, pointing to places where this could be doable, is doable, but just demonstrating all the ways in which it is. Compromising on framing establishing a time frame for it that meets the requirement of being a non-recurring expense. When we're sitting here in 3 years, and ostensibly we'll have, or I guess expectedly, we will have a whole new set of concerns and challenges, because that's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. Every year is going to present concerns. We have been facing some previously inconceivable challenges. But it doesn't mean that everything's going to be all sunshine and roses, or there's some sort of finish line on this. We all get that. But I think that what we need from the district is we've laid a lot of this information out. We've shown the numbers, we've extrapolated it. We've said this is what the actual cost. We've pointed to places in which these funds are available. Obviously, we have disagreements about the prudence of using the funds. But in response to those concerns, we've readjusted our proposal. We've come up with a counter proposal. We've been handing these things over and trying to come up with.
Clarify that. Can we clarify that?
Yeah.
You proposed the longevity between 250 and 1250.
Yes.
And then your second proposal was the same, only that it sunsetted after 3 years. Am I leaving anything out?
No, that's
It's the
correct.
same proposal you proposed initially. Use the money for a longevity supplement. And we said a longevity supplement that is recurring and FRS eligible is an adjustment with another name, and that violates the statute. And then you came back with the same proposal, stapled it to an MOU, and said, okay, the longevity supplement is only recurring for 3 years, and then it stops. Our question, I think the question was posed, is how do you see that just stopping? Pay cuts for everybody, furloughs, and remember, 10 years ago, when we have 114,000 students, we have 88,000 now, and it's going down. And
These
charters,
are all just pieces that
these are all pieces that we have to
we have to
consider.
consider.
So when you throw out the same proposal, but say, okay, we'll only do it for 3 years, the length of the grant, it's really not realistic to think that that money is just going to stop, and we're going to figure out how to come up with it.
I've seen a number, I've worked with a number of, I mean, not at this table, of course, as I'll say again,
In
I'm
Hillsborough.
relatively new,
Look
yeah,
how
but in
that's
Hillsborough,
turned out.
but we're, pretty well, actually,
Yeah.
to be honest, they turned out well. When you work with a set of facts that you have, you work with projections, you certainly work with prudence, and I don't think on either side has demonstrated a lack of prudence. The idea that and I get it, I understand that we're speaking not just for the people in this room, but also the people that are watching at home. There's this idea that these funds are enticing. It's not a dangling shiny. It's we have made a proposal, we have pointed to places in the budget, whether it's the American Rescue Plan funds or in the allocation to the reserve or any other number of sub-accounts that might be that could potentially be adjusted to make room for this in the general fund. We've pointed to solutions. We've pointed to ways in which to make those solutions happen. So it's really not a matter of just being enticed by money. It is engaging in a meaningful discussion over how best to use the funds that are available, the entirety of the funds that are available to the district, which is our responsibility and, to be frank, our constitutional right. I understand the concerns over whether this might pass statutory muster. We have our own opinions about, and to be honest, I think this is one of the things that's challenging about it. We have very clearly stated our opinion that the statute violates the Constitution. I understand that you have a different legal view on the legality of the supplements. I understand that. We've shown evidence of other places that are not only have existing longevity supplements, but they are being put into place this year. Is it possible that the state pursues some sort of legal challenge to that, whether it's a rewrite of the statute or whatever? Yeah, it's always possible. That can always happen. But we work with the information we have now. And right now, this is well within the limits of the statute. What we have not heard, and I'll tell you that this is, I think, there's numbers but feelings matter, right? People need to feel that the district is standing with them in a condemnation is a really strong word. If the intent of this statute is so clear, as the district has even said, that we are circumventing, saying, well, this is circumventing the intent of the statute. If the intent of the statute is so clear, then it should be reprehensible to both sides that our veterans are being treated this way. And what we've asked the district to do is collaborate with us in these creative solutions on how to show that equity, to work within the statute, because the statute exists, whatever we think about it, the statute exists, and to work within the boundaries of the statute to find creative solutions to equitably value our veterans. Our people need to hear the district stand on them and say, we agree with you. You should be. This law does target our veterans. This law does attack those who have retained their contract and have legitimate concerns about moving on to the annual contract scale or the performance scale. They need to hear that the district sees this as just as important as we do. And I think that is one thing that's really been missing from the conversation is we have continually taken a stand for the veterans. We have continually come with like you're inviting us to do now, creative solutions. We've adjusted our own offers. To be frank, we need that same creativity. We need that same willingness to find a solution from the district and not just continual excuses as to why this is unworkable that we have put down at every opportunity. We've taken all sorts of different ways to show that this is workable. And so another invitation to come up with creative solutions when we have been continually talking about creative solutions and bringing them. This has got to be a two-sided effort. And I really think that that's something we need to see.
So I wanted to give you time, but I have some response to that. And I think we have just as you have expressed your opinion and your interpretation of where we stand with the statute language and so forth. I'm going to kind of put that to the side for a moment. And again, we will restate that. And again, I know it is not mentioning the full, what you are mentioning, equity, but I want to restate that I don't think there's another district out there that is offering a 3.25% raise. And I understand that it is an average, and I understand it is a 3.25. I will also go back and share with you a couple of times ago when we discussed about the highest level on the grandfather schedule. You know, we have now proposed step 36. If we want to continue, I think it's important to remind people who are at those upper levels, there is a built-in longevity, if you want to call it, step, because it's not a supplement, it's part of the raise. We have done that. We shared that at one meeting where if I'm at year 36 this year, I am making $6,500 more than I would be had we just capped you at year 30. There are other districts that have 25 as their top, and that is, you know, things that they've been doing. So again, I applaud us for, before I got to the table, you know, 6 years ago, that we added the year, and then we have continued to add years. That has been back and forth, and it's been great negotiations. But we recognize that, we value that. I understand that that doesn't affect people 12 to 25 or to 30. I'll recognize that. When we add, you're asking for us for suggestions too. That is what we are asking for as well. And other options and other suggestions. Are there any other suggestions? We mentioned we have been talking with the ESC, recognize the planning and this work, which is different than the salary we're talking about in equity. People at all levels, you know, not just the people on grandfather. So I think we recognize.
Right, back, you know, I guess, I'm sorry.
We do hear what you're saying, but I hope that you have also heard that we have, and I know you're tired of hearing it because we want people to understand we are needing to follow the sector. We cannot, as a district, provide or agree to anything that goes against the statute. And that is where we are having, and so we have to be, I absolutely agree, we have to be creative. So that is why we are asking for, yet again, you know, more suggestions from you. And I don't know where.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to go back to something that, like, percolate, I guess, like you said, and that is that time has always been a challenge. And that's something we discussed, I think, when we started in May about what they're talking about, you know, a small group, what was the biggest challenge? And we had issues with training. We were trying to group some of the issues that we have. And that's training, that's time for planning. And those are very important issues. And if we could almost marry those issues with the fact that there is money, and let's face it, planning and time for training, time for both, actually. Those are things that benefit students, and that's the purpose of this grant, it's the purpose of ARC. So those funds would be available for those types of things, and it solves issues that we've been hearing. Paying for additional planning, paying for additional training, and those are ideas that we're thinking about. We're still trying to kind of formulate, putting something together, but we wanted to throw that out there and see if we had any ideas from this group on those topics, or any other things that you thought would be a way for compensation other than salary.
I think that
That's what I was thinking, is
I'll
like,
take 5 out of 6.
put the 5 out of 6 back.
and I think
Now you've helped everybody. I bet you everybody would accept that over,
you're right, that time is in some situations, if not many situations, as or more valuable than money, and particularly now when the pressures are just indescribable on our educators. But I also think that I know that our contract proposal, our language proposal, because we haven't been having this salary discussion in an open book year, we've laid many, many creative solutions to this, different ideas that our contract proposal is full of them. On how to build in more time and how to build in more security for people for our people in their contract. And that, I think
Yeah, I think because if you're building more security into the job in general, by adjusting discipline processes and making sure everybody doesn't live with fear and opening up all of those things, limiting the number of evaluations, removing the DPP, all of these things that we suggested would be valuable to everybody and would have been very valuable to the veterans who are the most insulted by the evaluation system, which, by the way, we do have to speak briefly about a problem that's coming up and comes up every year because the administrators struggle to get in. But the point, I guess, that I'm trying to make is that if annual contract was not so horribly frightening to people, we wouldn't have any of these issues. Because everybody could just move over to the annual contract, we'd have one scale for everybody, everybody would be doing the merit pay thing, you got a highly effective, you get this, and there would be very little argument because we would have really nothing to say about it. But because the annual contract, at least here, has made targets of people, there are tons of veterans who are afraid to make that switch over. Now, some have, because they were willing to trade money because they needed the money and they had to do it. And I get that you make those sacrifices, or maybe they didn't care about advocating, but they did make the sacrifice. The problem is not valuing when you lose the veterans. And how many people are actually in that 30 through 36? Like, do we have a lot of people up in there in those years?
We've got this on the grid. I don't have it.
it'll take me a second to get there, but we do have some.
Because I mean, obviously it takes a pretty long time to get up there and to start
So, and I
seeing
just
some
want to,
benefit.
and I know I'm
Right?
So, and I also want.
Madam
President.
Yes.
Could I ask for a point of clarification?
Sure.
All right, so as a point of clarification, you have mentioned opportunities for training, opportunities for, pay in that way. Since we are looking at equity for our veteran teachers, does that mean that they would be paid at a higher rate for those trainings and that type of thing? Because if it's available to all people, then we're not really doing anything for them.
So again, that's what we've been trying to sit here and think and spend some time thinking about what you have said and what we can do to do that. That could be a proposal, right? That's the type of good conversation that we're having. Do we talk about training at your hourly rate? Do we talk about, different types of, training? Do we talk about, we've heard, like Ginger, you brought this up several times ago about differentiated, training, and, that's all absolutely, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Respectfully,
Proposing.
but I do want to make a point of clarification. When we're talking about value to the veterans, and I get what you're saying, is, it's a little bit apples to oranges, because the veterans, we always want to value our veterans just based on, respect for the time that they put in and the service that they provided and the care that they've shown these students for the this long period of time. But it's in the salary where our veterans have been specifically targeted. That's it. We don't, a rising tide raises all ships, right? We want to do the best we can for everybody. And in language, it is really an equalizer, because we're doing, when our people come to the classroom, whether you're a first-year teacher or your 30-year teacher, they're doing the job to care and educate the kids. they're not being necessarily, I mean, obviously, there are special circumstances, certain circumstances, individual circumstances, but they're not, but in the training rate, or various other, proposals that we've already made, they're not being specifically targeted. The salary, the salary allocation, salary increase, ratio formula that's in place specifically targets veterans. That's where we can point to the percentages and show that they are being victimized really by this very targeted move to value them less. I'm not saying that that's coming from you all.
Right.
We don't think it's coming from you. It's getting handed down from on high, but we ask you to stand with us in condemning that and putting that to action.
I was going to say that even in your update, in talking about the law, that this, if you had even just once said this unfortunate law, even just saying this unfortunate or unfair law that we are, anything, that would have gone a long way with your people. Because then they would realize that you feel the same way about that as we do. They know it's not initiated. Well, some of them do now because I've been pounding it into their heads about this law. But they don't get the feeling that you care that they're being hurt by this.
If I could just add, I just got today a letter from a teacher at my school, 17-year veteran, and I'm going to forward it to all of you. But it speaks to exactly Nancy's point, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of the things that she said. But you know, she's saying you can't. She's using a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, and she says, "You can't be in favor of justice for some people, not in favor of all." She's a 17-year veteran. She's been displaced from her classroom, displaced from her subject area on many occasions. She has worked when she's feeling discouraged by the education system. She's been working when she feels like her efforts are futile. She's been working even when she's feeling like she's losing hope in improving her students' lives. She's coming to work because she refuses to give up. And she's asking you, how come you are not showing her that equity? Where is the equity that we speak of? This is specifically what she's saying: equity, being equitable, having a growth mindset, providing positive encouragement to students. She's saying that you're not doing that for the veterans. So this is straight from a 17-year veteran. And I'll forward that to you and
That'd be great.
with her name, you know, so if you want to reach out to her and have a personal conversation with her. But, you know, this isn't just coming from, you know, the union president. This isn't just coming from, you know, our executive director. This is coming from your people. And I think it really speaks to Nancy's point where, you know, at the bare minimum, show that you're not, you might care, but they're not hearing it.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, they need to know that, and I mean, and as far as the longevity supplement, I still have a hard time understanding, because it is a separate issue. Yes, it ultimately goes into the salary. They receive it as salary, but it is a separate supplement, just the way all of the supplements are separate supplements. They're all separate. And they come and go depending on what you're doing. Now, granted, you can't go back in time, so longevity supplement wouldn't disappear if it was in place permanently. But I mean, it's not an unheard of thing. And you could argue that any veteran who's sitting as department head is getting a supplement, which would kind of circumvent the law, because she's getting more. If every principal said, well, I'm putting only veterans in those positions, and then they'll each get a supplement and they'll all get a better raise. Yeah, I mean,
So
supplements are supplements. And it's,
supplements are for additional work, additional
There's something-
responsibility.
right, that has been the case here because we don't have one. But many districts, many states, many districts in Florida have longevity supplements to show respect for people who show loyalty, especially when the teaching profession started to fall apart, which it is starting here. I know that you said we are not suffering, I mean, all of the nation is suffering a teacher shortage. All of Florida is suffering a teacher shortage. Apparently Pinellas is not, but I
I
think
don't think we ever stayed with that.
No, but I mean,
Correct that.
120, I mean, today I was just watching the jobs. They were going up today. It started in the morning at 122 and went up to 129 by the end of the day. Vacancies, 100 and I believe it was 34 on the support side, or 141, I think is where it ended up, because that also kept climbing. We are still receiving phone calls about people leaving. Teaching is not this big inviting job anymore. So we get, you want to bring in new teachers, you want to give them a great opening salary. But once they take a look, because this is what happened to me. I might as well tell that story. When I was considering moving out of New York because I couldn't stand digging my car out of the snow anymore, I wasn't discontented with the school system. I was discontented with the culture. And I looked at Florida, somewhere I had always wanted to live, and I looked at the comparison, and the comparison was $1,000 apart. It was $1,000 less for the level I was at. I think I was at three-year teacher at that point. 1,000 difference, and I said, that's not bad, I can swing that. And the cost of living is better in Florida, oh, I'll be fine. And I moved. And then, but in the process of filling out all the paperwork, and I saw the entire salary schedule, I was horrified, because the salary schedule was so horizontal in its increases, where I come from in New York, it's very vertical, with longevity increases periodically to pay honor to the people who stick it out. And it encourages people to stick it out. Because it makes it worth their while to be there. A longevity supplement is not some crazy thing that we made up. I mean, it exists, and to be honest, Florida needs to be more competitive in general. Never mind us being more competitive with Hillsborough and Polk and Pasco. Florida is not competitive. So many people have come down here, like me, and then turned around and went right back to their home states because we're not competitive. We can't keep up with what they can get somewhere else, including the treatment.
Supplement, the longevity supplement, like Nancy said, is new, would be new here in Pinellas, so well established in many other counties. The idea of supplements in general is not something new here. And we do have supplements that are extended to our professionals based on what they've accomplished. So our advanced degree supplements, for example, are based on accomplishments. Those were, and understandably so, a way to take the, what we saw in 2000, particularly in 2011, we saw significant changes to the way that salaries can be calculated for our educators, for our instructional personnel. This was a way to still value the work that people had put in, while still complying with the requirements of the law not to have that included in the actual salary. So it's not, this practice, this is not unheard of here, in not just with the longevity supplement, but in other, the other comparable
For
ways that we
example,
show
the
down.
advanced degree, you're right, that's in the statute in 1222, so the advanced degree supplements are recognized by the state. But generally, supplements are for additional responsibilities. The state has recognized for additional education that advanced degree supplements.
But they haven't stopped other districts from having them.
Right, and a lot of districts had certain supplements, they had them before the statute went into effect.
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
They have, as some had them for quite a few years. Some have initiated them this year. A couple of small ones have initiated them this year. It's not unheard of, and it's not, it's actually something that I always thought this county, Florida in general, needed, because it was what was missing with the pay. That's the main problem with your pay scale. It's the main problem with not being able to keep teachers in place. In New York, as pissed off as someone might get at the system, they're gonna hang in there because of those jumps they're gonna make at certain points. And they do. It works to keep people in. It has been, the research across the nation, across the world, has shown that a teacher is not completely viable, has not mastered their craft until 7 years. That is the research that is shown. It's pretty clear across the board. The veterans in your buildings that are beyond the 7-year mark are your instructional experts in your buildings. Because even administrators are only required to have 5 years in a classroom before moving up to administration. And granted, they may have mastered their skill within the 5 years, but it's definite that the people who have 10, 15, and 20, they're well beyond that 7-year mark that they say usually it requires to be really great at your craft. Those are the people that we are targeting. And they're losing that. Not only do you lose their practice in the classroom, which is devastating loss, but you lose their guidance of all of those new teachers coming up. Because that's where those new teachers coming up are getting most of their guidance. Trainings, yes, but when they're having a problem in their classroom, they ask the teacher next door who's been doing it a million years, and they give them tips and they tell them what to do and they demonstrate it for them. We can't afford to lose that. And a longevity supplement might keep people around longer. Where our new people are being drawn in by the opening salaries, and we have no problem with a good, healthy opening salary. But we are, they're not staying. We're not seeing longevity happen because there's no enticement to stay. I stayed because I got married, or I would be back to teaching in New York because I was on leave of absence and I could have gone back. I met someone, got married. Good or bad decision, not sure, still looking at it. But I mean, some days good.
How many years later?
But I mean, I stayed, but honestly, had I not met Chris and got married, I don't think I would have stayed here. I think I would have gone back and said, yeah, it's cold and crappy, but at least I'm treated with respect and I make good money. So I don't know if I'd have lasted. And I talked to many people, especially last year. COVID was the straw that broke a lot of people's back. And we know that. They may not have left if it wasn't for that. But that's exactly what they were saying to me. They were saying, I have to go back to my home state. I can't live here. This is terrible. So that's all I'm saying is we can fix not just Pinellas County, but Florida's competitiveness.
And I do appreciate that, and I think that's what I appreciate most about us pushing Kevin to keep the salaries moving forward, as opposed to saying, or not stretching what we have as far as it can go, because you're exactly right. That's our, and I believe, and that is Dr. Grego's first and foremost desire, since he's gotten here, has been to keep those salaries moving forward. And so I think I can agree with you on.
Sure.
I just wanted to make excuse me, an observation, and I'm very happy that you're looking at the equitable side and allowing teachers to have more of a voice and asking for our input and creativity. The problem is that we're meeting usually 1.5 hours, 2 hours at most. And I think that it would be very impactful if we were given TDEs to work an entire day. So we could really give you great proposals and really put some great thought into our counter proposals. You have asked for that. We don't necessarily have, the ideas that you've provided, but that will give both of us time to work together at a length of time, which would enable us to really get some progress made. So that's
Right. I do know that, I do remember, like last year, I remember, not last year necessarily, the last open book is usually what I'm thinking of. Our sessions were usually about 3 hours to three hours, genuinely, sometimes 4. And it did help move things along. It did help. And because those long sessions, a lot of times it was kind of going back and forth with language, like really working the language together in the same room and saying, well, you know, how about this and how about this, until we finally came to something that we all liked and said, okay, this works for everybody. And that takes time. It does, it takes time to do that back and forth. So yes, for the language alone, that's important to have that kind of time for that back and forth and that give and take, that true collaboration that we're all looking for. And now we have the added incentive of trying to find some creative ways to balance this out and show that, make sure that those veteran teachers know that despite what the legislature thinks of them, Pinellas County does not agree, does not think that way. We're willing to get creative to show you something, you know, to show you that.
I gotta tell you, with all due respect to, I'm gonna speak for the entire team. Are nicer people than me. I have struggled with, I'm sitting here struggling with this, where I see these people who have dedicated their time to this. I came in September, end of September. There was so much work that happened over the summer and these long sessions and process. I've got people running up, notes about suggestions, from the team. They have put forward meaningful, creative proposals for language, continually on salary. We have done this work. I think that I'm a little concerned that we're missing the point, which is that our team has done this work. They have come up with creative solutions that have been, for the most part, dismissed. It's not to say that there hasn't been any movement, but I think I could probably count on one hand the items that we have suggested that have been treated with a willingness to discuss. The salary agreement and it's not to say that what has otherwise been afforded our instructional personnel has not been a good thing when you talk about matching the governor's bonus. Again, that specifically excluded huge groups of employees. The district came in and said, we want to bridge that gap. That is the kind of thing that they're looking for. And again, in another targeted attack on a specific group of employees. If you just look at the numbers, just as a side note, you look at the numbers, only steps 12 through 16 among the veterans would be achieving a 3.25% increase with what's being proposed. Only steps 12 through 16. Every other veteran I just looked at level 12 on, everybody beyond that would not be receiving the 3.25. That's what's important to when we get into the numbers, not just the aggregate or average increase, but how it specifically affects people. So we've come up with these creative solutions and they have been denied. Not just, well, we can't really agree to that, but we'll look for something else, or I have strong feelings about that. It has just been, we don't think the contract needs more language on this. We don't think that the administration should be constrained in this way. Like it's not been meaningful, for the most part, meaningful discussion or meaningful discourse. So I'm surrounded by people who spent all day working in the classroom, and here they are even now being encouraged to come up with new solutions when everything we've put across the table has been a solution, has been a proposal, has been created, and they've been rejected. So I gotta tell you, I'm not feeling, I'm feeling as though that we're missing the core problem here, which is that they've done the work and it's been denied.
So
The bargaining team has done the work, is what I mean.
Absolutely. And we received, and again, the entire purpose of bargaining and negotiating is to propose language and then to propose counter language. And I understand what we haven't even gotten through our entire of being able to express why we have either adjusted, declined, rejected, and so forth. We haven't even been able to make it through our counter proposal, which I believe we gave in September. And I don't know, don't
Yes,
I
you want to think it was.
September 8th.
I
Thank
think
you.
September,
I
yeah.
thought it was, but, and so there are, and just like two sides, and I'm not saying you or us, two sides. A side has a proposal and a reason and valid reasons, the counter, the other side has to be able to reply and respond and provide reasons why either yes or no. And that's where absolutely those discussions should come. We have done this many years with a group, and some of the language that you were proposing to change, we have expressed that we would just reviewed and changed the last time around, and we had made allowances and we agreed to it at that point, and now we're asking to go back. So again, we are working through each request, and please don't think it was taken lightly. That is not what that absolutely doesn't go with what we were doing and deny it, but we have to provide that rationale of why we feel from our standpoint, it isn't a good proposal. And what can we do to move forward? And you're exactly right, Lindsay. It should be a back and forth, which is what we're asking today. And I don't think we ever stop doing that. I don't think that's never a good thing, is to say, I'm going to stop asking for feedback from everyone.
Well, look, so let me just add to that. Many articles in our contract are permissive subjects of bargaining, which we have no legal obligation to agree to. We can discuss and we can consider putting them in. And over the years, we have appeals for annual contract, people that are non-renewed on annual contract. We have things for department. We have all sorts of management prerogatives that we have agreed and negotiated processes that we're not required to do. So every time we meet and you request something, it's layering it on top of other items. And at this point, we spent a great deal of time adding a whole bunch of things the last go around. And now I think there were 39 articles where you have added additional, or proposed, I should say, additional prescriptive language. So at some point we say, no, we're not inclined to consider any more additions to these permissive subjects of bargaining. And that's what we've done. We've rejected further changes, further layers of prescriptive items. But
What's been
manager
rejected have been the kind of creative solutions that you're asking us for.
Exactly.
But what's been rejected has been the sort of the tailoring of the evaluation process, for example, and which was an MOU that we went back and forth on, maybe a month or so ago, and that was ultimately, we didn't settle on that, and we set it aside to say, well, we'll have to revisit it later. It's going to lead to an issue that Nancy's going to bring up in a second. Some protections around planning time. I mean, there's a number of things that we can point to. Once, I think it's important to clarify too, when you talk about a permissive subject of bargaining, yes, you're right that not every, you can interpret it very broadly in terms of just general work conditions. But even if it is a permissive source or permissive subject of bargaining, once you bargain it, it's being bargained. It's not as though
it's being bargained, but now we have an expired contract. So whether we choose to add to, we're fine with the contract as is. You're asking to increase in 39 articles. You've added additional language, additional prescriptive steps that need to be taken. That's what we're objecting to on many of these permissive subjects of bargaining.
Everything that we made suggestions on, proposals on, were issues in the schools that were consistently being raised. They were repeat problems in schools, repeat problems. And where else but in the contract should those problems have a resolution? That is what a contract is created for, so that both parties understand their responsibility, because it is laid out for them. Just like the discussion we had about the success plans. We all agree that a success plan can be a very helpful tool for a teacher who is struggling. But we have found that in some schools, and multiple schools, not just one or two, they're using them as a weapon. They're using them as discipline. They're just creating a success plan in the privacy of their own office, sometimes the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And they are just saying, here you go, there's your success plan. Well, that's not going to help anybody. Maybe it helped Charlie when he did that success plan, but I have different issues that I'm having a problem with. How is this going to work? No, it's being used as a weapon so that they can refer to it and say, well, you didn't improve it all, so now I can let you go. These are the exact reasons why people are terrified of being on annual contracts, because these things are happening. So we presented very clear language on how to do a success plan, the kinds of things that, not so specific, the kinds of things that should be in there, the idea of being collaborative, and that they need to be individual, all of the things. And you yourself said that you philosophically agreed with every single, well, one thing it was not, but for most of the things on the page, you thought it was a very fair layout of what a success plan should be and do. Now that's helpful for the teacher to see that, because they know, oh, this isn't a weapon, this is actually something created to help me. And the administrator knows, oh, okay, this is how it has to be done in order to help this teacher become better, which all principals should be trying to do, because we are in the middle of a teacher crisis. And yet, when you said, but it doesn't belong in the contract, I thought, where else would it be? That's a perfect place for it. That's where everybody refers to and says, and answers their gets their questions answered. It's a perfect place for it. And it's also comfort for that teacher who needs comfort and to be less afraid of being on an annual contract. Those are the kinds of things we proposed. We proposed terminal pay adjustments to help people who wanted to, if you are trying to encourage people to go leave the system, to make it so that they can leave the system with a little bit more in their pocket.
Encourage attendance because it encourages people to keep their time.
Right.
To maintain their
So, and we even talked about changing the rules on that, so the pay out a little bit every year, so that you're paying it out at a lower level. You're paying it out at it so that the district isn't suffering an enormous burden when a whole bunch of people go out.
And on that, we talked about that, and we said that is something we are going to consider.
I mean, these are all the kinds of things that make people feel more secure in their job, make people feel it's a way to get more money in their pocket, even though technically it's their own money, but it might be money that they wouldn't get at the end, depending on when they leave. I mean, there's so many things that we proposed in the initial proposals.
Which we had, or we had said that is definitely something.
Right, no, I heard that, I heard her say that. And I'm just saying, it's just, I don't know.
And I want
To me, I mean, I'm not that kind of person, so it's very hard for me to put myself into everybody else's shoes. I'm not the kind of person who, my value does not come from what I make for a living. My value of myself does not come from my salary. But there are many people, because society actually encourages that. And so there are many people who do not feel valued if their salary is not improving. And Pinellas County has been good as far as keeping them going, but it is very hurtful to someone who's put in 20 years to realize that the person coming in the door, that they will probably have to help and mentor and give tips to every single day, is making the exact same amount that they are. And eventually, if this law continues, more.
So that the legislature is very intentionally doing this, leveling the scale over the last several years. And, you know, I know you characterized it as a deliberate, I think I wrote down, you said it's a deliberate intention to hurt veteran teachers. The flip side of that is that that's not the case, but it's to value performance. And then under the former scheme, all districts, our district included, would give one group $1 more. The performance salary schedule had to make more, so we would do $1. So the legislature comes back and strengthens that, says, no, we really meant what we said, and that is that performance is what we're looking at, and we're flattening the scale.
But what about all those veterans who are highly effective? Why are they not getting the benefit of that?
Well, you're saying the veterans, but it's not the veterans, it's those on the grandfathered schedule.
And what's the difference then? Stop evaluating everyone who's not on annual contract. Because what difference does it make if they're effective or highly effective? It's not gonna change their salary in any way, so they shouldn't have to go through, at the very least, they shouldn't have to go through 2 observations. Because there's no value in it for them.
I'm not sure what you just said, but the legislature's intention, whether we agree with it or not, is performance. It's not necessarily as you interpret it to hurt veteran teachers. It values those on the performance salary schedule. And whether you think it's fearful, I think I wrote that down to be on the annual contract. That's a perception, but if you look at it, we non-renewed, what, 70 people last year?
I looked, if that, I know over the last 4 or 5 years, there has never been more than that. And actually, I think last year was actually about, I think last year was 36.
36 people.
Non-reappointments. So again, that's then half of a percent, you know.
Just because you're not non-renewed, doesn't mean you have the fear of it.
No, and I'm not saying, but I think it was, you know, we were talking about for fear of non-renewal, right? For fear of losing your job, which means to me being non-reappointed. And we just wanted to make sure people aren't out here thinking there are 500 people being non-reappointed.
Just to a further point, if the legislature did honor those on the grandfather scale, they're really actually looking at performance. Then again, to Nancy's point, why do they not get that bonus as well?
Right, they're highly effective.
Everyone
Many of
that's
them
highly effective
achieve
should
highly
get that bonus,
effective,
it's-
but they're not being given anything else.
The point is, there is this formula, and we're going to abide by it.
Sounds
So
like you said you disagree.
what
with
can
it.
we do to, pardon me?
It sounded to me like you said you personally disagree with it. Is that right?
It's really not for us to.
It's
I'm not saying that they intended to hurt somebody, I can't say I
That's
agree
where
with
our
that.
opportunity lies to make it equitable now.
But
You're entitled, everyone, including you, are entitled to have opinions about what our legislators do to our educators. And whether you like, maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it, but to say it's not my place to make a judgment, well,
Well, in my
absolutely, you
position-
work in education.
well, in my position, in my position, they can speak for themselves, in my position as the negotiator for the district, I will reserve to keep that opinion because I have to follow this.
But you can follow something and still say that you don't think it's a fair, I mean, we follow laws all the time that we don't necessarily think are fair.
We're doing it in our proposal well comports with the law.
Yes,
We're doing that.
we never
We
once questioned
fundamentally-
the
we fundamentally
3.25
stand on it.
or the structure, because we get it. It's the law. We've made it clear, we think it's a horrific law. It's an aberration, but it's there. We didn't talk about this. We said, all right, let's go do something over here that will show the veterans that they
We
are
have-
respected and
We
valued
have not
and that they
asked for
should stay.
a single dollar difference in the salary increase ratio that was the original district proposal. That has not changed in this time. In September, is when that was introduced. We did not ask for a single dollar more to be added into that ratio, not one. What we did was say, here's how you make it equitable.
Right.
And that proposal, our proposal has not changed. Well, no, that's not true. That the dollar amount has not changed. We then responded to what we heard, which was we're concerned about these non-recurring funds. We can have arguments over whether these funds are truly non-recurring. We can have arguments over whether, actually, there's no really an argument to be made in that the statute, plus the guidance on the federal money specifically allows for this. But we tailored our counter proposal to be more in line with the concerns that the district has about these being
Right.
expenditure of non-recurring funds for recurring funds. Okay, so we made ours non-recurring. I
Right,
mean, we have continually come back to the table and we're not seeing that same willingness.
but
from
Kevin
the
said,
district.
what was the total cost of what that would have been?
I-
Lindsay, do you remember the total cost of what it would be to do the longevity for the first year?
Oh, it would be, well, my calculations were about between 2.5 and 3.5 million, depending on, again, because I had early September numbers.
Right,
But we're thinking it's somewhere in the $2.5 to $3 million range.
okay, so had Kevin, instead of the focus on the recurring, non-recurring, which is what we responded to, had Kevin said, well, that's way too high, I'm not comfortable, that's way too high to throw in there. And then we would have played with the numbers. What we were responding to your issues. And that's what bargaining is we listen to what you say and where the issues are, and we try to work around them to make them palatable to be done. I mean, I had actually anticipated that the numbers that we placed in there might need to be negotiated, because maybe maybe they're too high. Maybe they're too high in some areas, but not in others. Maybe, I certainly anticipated a conversation like that. That never even happened.
So the reason that didn't happen is because of our requirement to follow statute. Statute really says that this conversation many times, and I don't understand the adamancy of a supplement as opposed to a bonus. Bonus is, and I know you mentioned about taxation, but sort of agree with you, that's really the case.
We've also maintained that you can call it a number of things. I just don't agree to
Well,
the
I think the
structuring
second
that it's bonus, that you
Yeah,
can call
the
it.
statute defines bonus out of the term adjustment, so that is something that we could work with.
It makes-
Special
You
payments,
said,
special payments,
Well, do
stipend,
it,
there's a number of
period.
ways to address it. There's a number of ways to address it. I don't agree with structuring it as a bonus, and we well accounted for the reasons that
we understand
that.
you don't.
But also, I think it's, again, I want to get back to, I think it's important not to let the tail wag the dog on this. The essence of it is recognizing all of these different things that can be done. If you truly recognize that, you have not come to us with any kind of, if you're saying, it could be done as a bonus. You haven't proposed anything like that. We have come with counter proposals. We have continually come. There has been no counter. Correct me, please, if I'm incorrect.
We asked point blank, would you consider a non-recurring bonus? And you said absolutely not.
You said, in fact, I will never consider a bonus.
Period.
Not a
Period.
bonus.
That's
Yeah.
what you
Yes,
said,
well,
that was what we had.
You just said that we haven't come here, we asked.
Okay, well, let me make it clear, because I think this has been something that we've been pressed on before too.
Okay.
Is that was if you were asking if we would consider it, and we said no, that we would not consider a bonus, but there are other ways to structure this that could potentially, if you felt uncomfortable with the legality of it, which we don't agree on that,
And that's
but
fine,
if you
know,
needed to
yeah.
structure it in a different way to satisfy your concerns about the legality of it, then that's fine. What I've said was, I don't agree with it being structured as a bonus for X, Y, and Z reasons. But
Right.
we would be, and I remember that specific meeting because we were across the street at the district building and said, but again, you could come with a suggestion that we would consider. And we specifically said that because I second guessed myself even walking out of the door, saying that wasn't a counter proposal. That was just asking if we would
Well,
consider it.
why, can I ask a question? If we asked, would you consider, and you said absolutely not, why would we then come, that's one of the options we can come to you with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I
for
would
us,
invite
for you
you
to
to.
sit there and say that you haven't come to us, well, you told me absolutely not. And so, I don't know, that would be a little silly for you to come and say, hey, I'm gonna propose a bonus.
I still do disagree with it, so don't come with a bonus, because we said that we won't
Right.
consider it structured as a bonus, but if you haven't even
What
at
is
the
the problem
table.
with bonus aside from the
Suggested-
taxation,
There's
the FRS thing?
It doesn't contribute to FRS and the taxation issue, whether you can argue that it's six in one hand, half a dozen in the other, you're paying now, you're paying later. When
Lindsay,
people,
I've said this before, and I'll
I
say this
know.
group, they have to make a bonus is, yes, you're right, under IRS rules, the bonus has to be held at 22%, right? But we have allowances to districts, we have individuals that work for us on a regular basis, and if we pay them a bonus, we withhold them on the rate, that's our normal practice, that's what we do.
and thank you for sharing that at this.
A best in place bonus, we withhold at their normal withholding rates, we don't withhold that. That's really not a factor.
And I appreciate your sharing that, Kevin, because, and I think this is one of the challenging parts about it. I'm the only person beside, and you, on our side of the team that sits at both tables and is in negotiating a vote. That explanation of district policy regarding bonuses that was shared with me at the PESPA bargaining, like when we did it last week. And so that clarification of the district policy really helped. That's not been something that's been extended here. And it is something that if you wanted to come and say, hey, we're proposing this bonus, but this is how this would go, or we'll call it a salary, or not a supplement, we'll call it a stipend or a special payment. We open the door to all that. And in fact, since then, we've come back with even making our own offer non-recurring. We have not had that same willingness
so
to
if-
move
Well,
from the district.
so now that you're explaining it again and clarifying it, because again, if I ask somebody, would they be interested in something, and they absolutely say no, I'm not gonna waste my time to go and do all the legwork, neither
I've
would
done all the
you.
legwork, actually.
And-
You're wasting your time.
Well, on our, you're telling us that we have to come up with anything, so I'm telling you, on a proposal, that would be work on our part to come to you with a proposal. And so if you are interested in something, that is what we're saying, we'll take it back and we will provide a proposal to you about that. Again, we ask that, and just because we're
I
trying
think we
to look
made
at
it clear, I think we've made it absolutely clear that the door was open to any number of alternatives, a number of counter proposals, meaningful counter proposals, and we have made that clear.
But I think that if we did actually, we would not consider a bonus.
Right, I would not consider a bonus, and we explained the terms under which we would not, which was the taxation and the way that that would be structured, even if later it ended up not affecting our people in the, like, it was initially taxed at a higher rate and then they got it back on the return, it still is meaningful to people when they receive it. If you if you would clarify, I mean, it's that you could say, our practice is to not take this withholding, so which really functions differently than a bonus generally does. But if you wanted to specify that in the counter proposal, then that operates differently from our understanding of what a bonus would look like. Again,
So
clarifying that
we'll
that
take
happened at the team, that happened at another table last week, that has not been something that has been put across this table.
I asked a couple times when we were here, are you asking for a bonus? And you said, no, we don't want a bonus.
No, we're not
Because we
asking,
thought
we
it
are,
was taxed at the higher
we're
rate.
not asking for, I want to make that clear.
Right.
Very clear, as I think I've done before. We are not asking for a bonus. We're asking for a supplement. And then responding to your concerns about a supplement, we asked for, or we made a proposed making it non-recurring, specifically within the bounds of this 3-year infusion of federal money that we know that we have coming in, again, amounting to, in total, over $300 million. The refusal
Let me,
to, I'm sorry, Kevin,
let
really
me say,
can't.
$300 million, you're correct about that number, however, you have to remember that charter schools and private schools.
Yeah, no,
That's not insignificant.
no, it's not insignificant, but neither is $300+ million. It's not to say that it's insignificant. None of it is insignificant. I feel terrible treating it like it's insignificant. We know people are facing true, legitimate, sometimes insurmountable financial challenges, right? They're particularly living in this area. I get it. Right. So when we're talking about the budget, we say, oh, this isn't that much money. Yeah, it is. It really is a lot of money. In the grand scheme of things, comparatively, maybe not as much, but these are real dollars that affect real people. I want to pay respect to that. But when it has been just a refusal to even talk about it, a refusal to budge on it just based on philosophical grounds, and then now, after so much discussion, framing it as, well, we haven't brought a proposal because you said not to, and we have continually come understanding of a bonus. Our understanding of a bonus.
One
If I may-
proposal.
Sorry,
You had one proposal, and then you came back and said, okay, it'll only last for 3 years.
that's a counter.
Okay,
Okay, so
so
that's
by
one
saying-
proposal that you said, all right, we'll only do the same proposal for 3 years. Realistically, we have a problem with that because it just can't drop. It's built.
Again, that's subject to negotiations, just like everything else that we do at the table, clearly.
I think
We're
we all
in it,
know,
we're
once
enmeshed
you
in
give someone a $1,250 bonus for 3 years and they're budgeting on that, it's pretty difficult to take.
I can understand that, and again, we
I
need,
would argue that something that occurs 3 times is in fact recurring.
sorry?
I would argue that something that occurs 3 times is in fact recurring.
I would say that if you're talking about $300 million that are coming in over the next 3 years, that's about as recurring as you're gonna get.
No.
So if it
It's more
specifically
guaranteed than
lines
the
up with the
FTE
funding-
money that comes
And I
in.
have-
We never know how much that's
And
gonna
again,
be.
we've also continually said that if you don't want to use the ARP funds to do this, that's okay. That's okay. I don't have to have it tied to the ARP. I really don't. But you also look at twice, I'll say it again, twice, the board mandated policy for allocation to the reserve. We doubled that this year. And that in itself, the board policy is itself almost twice what is required under statute. And I know that I'm sure that y'all discussed this when you were speaking with Fish this week. that healthy reserve is important, but we have doubled that. Almost doubled the reserve, the school board policy on that with no question. And we're supposed to just say, oh, well, again, take that first extension of, well, the money's just not there. This is the best we can do. That is not negotiations. It's not to say that everything else that the district has extended isn't great, it isn't generous. Those are good, but that discussion has to be there, and that has been denied. It's been denied, and we have absolutely shown over and over with proposals on the language, with willingness to move around and you know, I could point to a million examples, shouldn't have to because it's all out there. A million examples of ways in which we have demonstrated our willingness to compromise, and we have not seen it. We just have not seen it across the table from the district. So if you'll excuse me, I have a really hard time letting the people on this team who have worked all day and have continually come back and carved out their time because this is not work time. We've worked all day and come to do this, be encouraged to find more ways. They have come up with a million ways and they have just been rejected. So I'm
And
not-
we've heard, you know, we know and are incredibly grateful for the insurance not going up this year. That's a big, wonderful thing. $9 million is I was gonna say a lot of money. It's a boatload of money. In Brooklyn, it would be a shitload. You know, and it's not like we were scoffing at that, but we also do know you're going to get at least half of that back. It's probably, you were estimated hopefully 4 million. I think it's actually gonna be closer to 5 million coming back. Well, that covers the first year. And then the other 1 or 2 million get popped into the reserve. I mean, but if your concern was truly, well, I see 3, even though this is now, they're saying that the 3 years, that's still recurring. We never heard, how about let's just do it 1 year and see how that goes. We didn't get that back. I mean, that would be a counter. That would be saying, we're concerned even for a recurring for 3 years, if that was legitimately your concern, one of your concerns.
That's one of my concerns. The other concern is the fact that we're holding supplement under the statute.
What are the terms that you can use that are in the thing, that terms you can use for extra?
Okay, so under the statute that we keep referring to, I am looking under section 1, subsection 4B. In determining the grandfathered salary schedule for instructional personnel, district school board must base a portion of each employee's compensation upon performance demonstrated under S 1012.34 and shall provide differentiated pay for both instructional personnel and school administrators based upon district determined factors, including but not limited to additional responsibilities, school demographics, critical shortage areas, and level of job performance difficulties. Under my humble opinion, my paralegal degree is about 20 years old, but the way I am reading this and the way that I've read through the rest of the statute, it sounds as though in the statute, it is telling us that people on a grandfather scale can receive differentiated pay, and it's up to the district to decide the reason for it. It gave some examples, but it says it is not limited to these. So in that case, if I am reading this and understanding it correctly, a longevity supplement, whatever you want to call it, would not be circumventing the statute.
I guess, I know this from the very beginning, and I know we're out of time, but when they first passed this law, and I was horrified by it, I know I reached out right away and said, we're gonna have to be super creative. we're gonna have to really think about how we're gonna work around this, not work around the law, but work around how are we going to benefit those people who are getting hurt by this law, who will be hurt. We're gonna have to do a lot of really creative thinking, and I'm just putting that out there now because we're gonna be hitting this in October and we really need to be ready. And Lori, I believe, your response was, yeah, sure. I mean, yes, we'll talk about it then. This is down the line. We don't have to talk about this now because we were, the budget wasn't even out yet and we were still working on the language. And actually working on the MOU where everything got put aside because we were working on the MOU. But I know that this was from the very start, and so we presented language that we thought could balance things and maybe make it easier for people to not be so terrified to move over to the annual contract. Which the annual contract, if it was seriously just a performance contract, everyone would have moved over to it. Because they would have had the option for more money, and they don't have the option on the grandfathered scale. Even if they get highly effective, they don't get anything extra for it. So why wouldn't they jump over? Why not? Because of the annual contract part and the part that it's been used as a weapon. I know that you say not a lot of people are non-renewed.
I was just telling you how much.
Right, we know that. But it's used as a threat. You think OPS is used as a threat a lot? Non-renewal is used as a threat way more often than that. And that's why people live in fear. They're afraid. And sometimes they're afraid even to advocate for their own kids, for their students. We don't want teachers like that. We want teachers who are willing to step up and say, wait a minute, I don't think this program is working. Or wait a minute, my kids really hate this. Can we try something else? Or we can't have them afraid to say that and offer their opinions, because their opinions are incredibly valuable in order to achieve what we all want to achieve, and that is student success. We all want the same goal, and we have to get there together. So that is my main point, is that the only reason we were trying to clarify things and put it out there in the contract was so that people would stop feeling so afraid of the words annual contract. Because if you're doing your job, you don't have to worry about those words. That's not what the message is out there. Because as even if a teacher says, well, okay, I'm gonna look at the odds, and not a lot of people have been non-renewed here, so I got good odds. I think I can speak up. I think I can say what I think. Well, only one person has to be non-renewed for it to be scary for everyone else in the building who's on that contract. That's all it takes. One person. And we've seen it happen in all of the schools with issues and schools with no issues, or that are obvious. We're trying to make annual contract not a horrible, horrible thing, because then all these problems go away. Everyone's on basically the same contract, just like they are in Hillsborough. Most people are on, right?
Yeah, very few people are on the grandfather scale because it's not tied to their contract. You could, the performance, be on the performance scale and maintain tenure. It's not tied to your contract status. That's tenure, full on tenure. So it's not an impossibility. Treating it as
It's
though
doable,
impossible.
right?
It's
And take the fear out of it, and then we wouldn't have all these nightmares of how these people get paid this way, and these people get paid this way.
All right, well, let us take some of those ideas and we'll get back to you on that. If you want to get with me later this week and schedule our next one, we can do that. New Year's Eve.
Yeah, later, where Lindsay and I we have the governance board, the FEA governance board in Orlando. We will be gone, it's Friday, Saturday. Well, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah,
And so we will be gone as will Nelly.
Okay.
So we'll be gone, we won't be here Friday. And obviously tomorrow, as you can see, is the party that we are trying to put together frantically while doing everything else
I was
for
going to
our.
move this paper back over there.
And again, if, I know it was last minute, and I know that Paul, I think already responded, but if
Yeah.
you wanted to swing by and just have a little cup of cheer or a little bite to eat with us, please feel free.
Yeah,
We'll be handing out cheers.
Let's hear Keep going.
We got it over here.
Thank you.
I don't want Nellie yelling at me, so I think, okay.
You know, like, she'll know
Yeah.
exactly where.
Bill,
we're supposed to be. I never.
This
Sort of like,
was-
this was not my.
And I'm actually gonna tell you this,